Hey guys, how's it going? So I was watching this video by Chris Hawks right here, he's a good YouTube tech guy. I'm a big fan of his, and so I recommend you subscribe to his station and follow because he's got a lot of great insights. This isn't the first time I've mentioned him either, at least on my channel. Um, so I recommend you give him a look and subscribe. Anyway, he posted a video today about why web development is so hard right here. And he goes into the evolving ecosystem of JavaScript development, React, Node, Express, Vue.js, Babel, Webpack, all that good stuff, all the stuff that we're seeing today in the React development world. And it's also ties into a lot of what I was talking about last session about JavaScript fatigue. And um, and the main gist of his point is that these tools are becoming more and more sophisticated, and so as a result, web development in general is getting harder and harder, all of which I completely agree with, by the way. Web development is getting harder. There's no doubt about it. The ever-increasing speed at which these tools and frameworks come out, the sophistication, the level of sophistication, the level of knowledge required to see everything working, tie all the pieces together, which is probably the hardest part, is combining all the concepts into a working functional application site is certainly getting more and more difficult as time goes on. Um, and Chris had a lot of good points as to why that what impact that has on developers and the overall marketplace for developers. One thing that struck out to me was he said that he knows a number of developers at his old company who just won't be able to hack it in this environment anymore, and that's something I'm starting to see as well. That there aren't uh, the programming in general, especially on the website, is becoming more and more so. Um, I don't know, complicated really isn't the word. It just requires a lot of different skills now. That there are people who just can't do it anymore. Whereas maybe even as little as 5 years ago, 3 to 5 years ago, those people could compete. They could get an entry-level job and bone up on their front-end JavaScript, CSS, HTML, um, and jQuery skills and compete in the landscape, use Bootstrap, things like that. All the stuff that we see today, or have seen in the past 3, 4, 5 years or so, more if you're jQuery and Bootstrap for longer than that. So the bar is being raised. And it has interesting implications for what it means for the web development world from a labor standpoint. How does that affect people like myself? I'm a consultant engineer in New York City, primarily working with startups. I did mostly iOS development, but now I've been doing more web development. And the landscape changes a lot every year, especially in the web. Things move pretty fast, so I find it an interesting question. You got these big players like Facebook, obviously, Uber. I'll get back to Uber in a few seconds, but in a few minutes. But Airbnb, Amazon, Microsoft, whatever. Well, maybe not so much Microsoft anymore, but um, you got these big players using these increasingly sophisticated tools like Airbnb. They use React on their front end. Facebook, obviously, they invented React, so they have a heavy investment in that technology. And all these companies now are getting more and more into that using these increasingly sophisticated stacks, right? Um, which is a sobering realization if you're a new web developer. Whereas maybe as little as 3 years ago, you can go to a boot camp, learn Ruby on Rails, get some jQuery knowledge down and some Bootstrap knowledge down in 12 weeks, which is totally reasonable if you're hardworking, and then essentially get a job as an entry level dev and then go from there. Well, now that's not. I mean, that's still true. It's just not as true. That's all. Everything's just a matter of degree, right? Like, how is it? Is it still the case? Yes, but not as much as it used to be, because these new frameworks and tools and libraries have just blown all that stuff out of the water, right? So jQuery is kind of going the way of the dodo. Like, it's not going to be the main front end library soon, and on for JavaScript, for bigger companies like Facebook and Airbnb and whatnot. So if you're a new tech guy, if you're a new graduate of a boot camp or just college or whatever, and you just got out, and you're seeing all these job posts saying, well, we want React, we want Node, we want Flux or Redux, which is an implementation of Flux. You know what that's pretty tough. Where does that leave you? Right, that's a big question. Where does that leave you as a new graduate? And as I go through my GitHub, I have a couple of followers on GitHub, and I see kind of what they're doing, and they're all starting these React repos, starting their own React repos. These are people who graduated local boot camps, so they didn't know React coming out of their boot camp, and they're finding out now, like, oh shit, like I should have studied it. Like in order to get my foot in the door, what I thought was enough isn't turning out isn't enough anymore. Right? I need to do more Node and React. I did this in another video a couple weeks ago, but I'll do it again right now because it's March 3rd. So we'll look at the Hacker News Who's Hiring thread for March. So this is very recent. This is 2 days old, 2 days ago. It is March 3rd, 2017. And so if I do a search for React, I'm going to find 210 matches. I'll explain in the last video, like I did in the last video. That doesn't mean there are 210 posts for React hiring jobs. That means 210 posts contain the word React. All right, let's say we do a match for Rails. 114, still pretty good, but it's not 210 or whatever React was. 210. Redux shows up 44 times. Angular, every month this happens. Angular's getting a little bit less and less and less. It's like it's just fading away, And a lot of these boot camps, they teach Angular and they teach Ruby on Rails and they teach that's the main stack that they teach. But it's becoming more and more React. And the bad news for that is that React, especially with the tooling environment that it revolves around it, is harder than Angular, at least in my experience. And I was a professional Angular dev as well, so I'm speaking from personal experience. So I'm not like just it is obviously just my opinion, but that is an informed opinion. Is my point. I'm not just speculating or just trying to make an inflammatory opinion. But React is harder than Angular, mostly because of how fast things are moving. Things are changing. ES6 to ES5 to ES6, JSX. Are you going to use npm or yarn? To create React app? All these tools are just constantly changing. And Babel and Webpack versus browserify. Which one are you supposed to use? I don't know. Whereas Angular wasn't quite like that. Angular is kind of like out of the box, gave you everything you needed. And React, that's just not the React philosophy, which by the way, I like. I like just using my own tools, not my own tools, but making my own choice, having my own choice as to what tools I want to use and things like that. I appreciate that. I like to be able to pick and choose. So for example, I don't use Axios for my network requests. I use a Super Agent. I like it. It works. Gets the job done. And I just like the APIs are clean and simple, and easy to use. So I like that about React. So as a new dev, this has various implications on the sort of the developer economy, the labor market. I'm going to see greater and greater separation between the senior devs. Sort of a higher level separation from the wheat from the chaff, right? Whereas before, everyone was sort of competing in the same arena, roughly speaking. Angular, maybe Backbone, or some other front-end MVC framework, Ember, whatever, and Ruby on Rails, Python, Django. By the way, those two are still pretty strongly around, but sort of everyone was in the same arena, and the senior developers were simply the ones who did it better. That's all. So he's just a more experienced Rails developer with excellent Angular and jQuery skills. So that's a senior dev. That's a CTO level type of person. Whereas now what we're going to see is more of a strong separation of the market, stronger line of demarcation, where the more higher paid devs, the senior, quote unquote, senior devs, are doing a whole different thing. They're doing React, Node, React, with server-side rendering, building out more of a microservice architecture in their environments, um, and using these higher, more complicated tooling systems, and libraries like Redux, if you consider Redux complicated, maybe MobX or whatever. Um, and then you're going to have a second tier of developers who just sort of stuck at the not sort of the older way of doing things, but the easier to learn way of doing things, like Rails and Angular 1. I remember when I learned Angular 1, I mean, it took me a while to get good. It took me like somewhere between 6 and 9 months to get really, really good, but it took me like a month, not even a month. It took me a couple of weeks just to learn how it works, how to put everything together. I could put together a full CRUD application using Angular 1 and Node or Rails within like 7 days of picking up Angular 1. So it was actually really easy to learn. React, that's just not how it works. Well, how it went for me. It was much harder. Um, and so Chris Hawkes is 100% right about that. So what that means is we're going to have a higher, a separation of the labor pool between um, these stacks, right? Where the progression will no longer be to be a good developer, you got to get better at the framework. You just got to really learn Angular inside and out, learn how to use filters and services and directives properly and things like that, and how to organize your code base and just be a better version of the junior dev. What we're going to see more and more is the junior dev, just that's his skill set, is the Ruby on Rails with maybe jQuery and some minimal React. Maybe not even that, because a lot of the React a lot of the people I've seen, it's just too hard. Yeah, they just certain people will just never get there. And Chris Hawkes was mentioned that too in his video, and I agree with that. Things are getting so difficult on the front end and web development in general that certain people, it'll just completely separate out certain people altogether. Not that that wasn't happening already, but it'll be even more so. So, 3 years ago, 3 years ago, um, I would venture to guess, and I have no stats on this. I'd like to look it up actually, but let's say 3 years ago, 2014, 100 graduates from a flagship boot camp in this area, let's say Flatiron School. I wonder what the employment rate was after graduation within, let's say, 3 months. And I don't mean the bullshit stats like they're TAing for the next cohort, none of that shit. Like who's actually working as a bona fide software developer at a big company or a startup, not like working on his own projects, not doing his own startup, like working as an employed person, a W-2 employee, full-time, salary, benefits, all that stuff, um, versus today, right? And my guess is that the numbers are lower today. That's my guess, because the demands are higher for the web dev skill set. That's number one. And a lot of this is being driven by companies that are just massively funded, like Uber, like Airbnb, and obviously Facebook. They're no longer, a startup, but they have the funding to do all this forever. So they can drive up all the labor rates, and that's exactly what they're doing, right? Come to think of it, this might be the whole plan. This might be the way that they win the labor war. So, develop a technology that startups just can't compete to pay for. So, my rate in New York City is $150 an hour, and that's probably below the median right now for a person of my level of skill, my level of experience, 5 years in the industry, and for someone to pay me to do a Node React project, with all the bells and whistles, Redux, server-side rendering, get it working, all the proper functionality working and whatnot, unit testing and all that stuff. You're gonna have to pay me my rate, right now. Whereas before, 2 years ago, my rate was about the same. It was a little bit less. It was 100 to 125, depending on iOS versus web. But 2 years ago, the question was, well, we can get a junior guy with the same stack, but he just graduated from boot camp or university, and so he's charging 50 an hour. So he might not be as good as me, Dan Kwan, but he costs less. So we might go with him because as a company we might go with him because even though he might not be as fast and as good, we don't have the budget for your rate, and that's fair. And that conversation obviously happened, in my career a number of times. So the question then becomes, okay, today then can you have that same conversation within the context of Node and more specifically React, not Node, but React specifically, React Redux. Can you do that? Now I'd be astonished if you could find a guy in New York City who's charging under 50 an hour for Node React Redux programming by the hour. Um, if you do find that guy, send him an email and say you are undercharging, son. Like that, you should be charging at least double, if not triple, that rate. Um, and I'm talking like, maybe less than 2 years of professional experience. I'm not talking 5 years in. I'm talking guys who graduated boot camp 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago, and they just got really good at Node, React, and Redux. And Node, React, and Redux, and they should be charging on the very low end 50 in New York City or Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Mountain View, but more likely 100. And once you're past 2 years, you're looking at 150 and up. That's why I said I think I'm below the median. I might have to raise my rates. How do I know? How do you know when you have to raise your rates? When you getting clients who perpetually want more and more and more of your time. That's how you know your rates are too low, right? So uh, that's where I see this market going. And then the comparison is no longer, well, we'll just have to go with another guy with the less experience than you, but has ostensibly the same skill set. Ruby on Rails, jQuery, Angular 1, whatever, the old school set. It's crazy that that's the old stack now, because I remember when Angular 1 was like the cool kid in town. I remember that wasn't that long ago. That was like 2010. I guess that was, for me, that was not that long ago, but between 2010, 11, and 12, Angular 1 was like what React is today. It was like, if you're not doing Angular 1, you're nothing. It was that kind of environment. Anyway, going back to what I was saying, that conversation is changing now a little bit. You're not going to find junior devs who are capable at building a full stack Node, React, Redux application as much as you were for Ruby on Rails and Angular 1 and things like that, simply because it's harder. It's just harder. So I don't really know how this is going to shake out, to be honest. You get a lot of startups who think they need Node, React, Redux, but they might find out the hard way that they even still they can't afford it, and they're going to have to go with an old school stack, which I see a lot too. I see a lot of guys in my office. It's a WeWork, so it's a bunch of startups. They're building out their stacks in either Ruby on Rails or Node on the back end, which is fine. You should be okay with that for a while. But they're building out their stacks on Angular 1 because they could hire an Angular 1 dev for like 30, 40 bucks an hour. That's because we're in New York City, where every few months they're just cranking out more and more junior devs with Angular 1, jQuery, Ruby on Rails. The market's oversaturating, right? So it's a very like appealing call to these startups where it's like, oh well, I need to find a developer, and this guy's only charging 40 bucks an hour, 35 bucks an hour. He just graduated so-and-so boot camp, and he knows Angular 1. I don't know the difference between Angular 1 or React or Ember or Backbone. I don't give a shit, PHP. I just want this shit built, and for as cheaply and quickly as possible. So they do that, and then when they're looking for more and more senior devs, and first of all, normally what happens next is the project goes to shit anyway. That's standard. If you're a junior dev in this position, just be ready for that. It's going to just go to shit if you're one of the lead devs on that project. Even if you're not, it's probably still going to go to shit, to be honest. And then what happens next is the founders will try to find senior devs, because then they learn sort of the error of their ways. Like, you can't hire a bunch of junior guys to build out the project. You're just going to have the blind leading the blind. So then typically the smart ones learn after about 6 to 9 months. All right, now we got to find a senior guy who knows what he's doing. That's where my phone call rings or my email, I get the email and I see, oh, it's built in Angular 1, uh, Ruby on Rails or Node, I don't care, or Python, Django, whatever, but Angular 1. First thing I say is, that's your problem right there. We got to get it out of Angular 1, switch it over to React. And if there's resistance to that, I just don't do the project. You're deterring all your best senior talent. And unless the rates are just blow me away rates, like $600 an hour, like that kind of stuff, like you can't turn it down, right? But if you're just going with my standard rate, I'll just go with another React Node project because why not? That's what I want to do. So I may as well get paid to do what I want to do if it's all the same. If it's all the same, I'm just going to do what I want to do, right? So that's what happens, and that's not an unusual scenario. I can think off the top of my head, I can think of 3 companies in my office right now in WeWork who are in that exact situation, and they've hired devs too cheap for the Angular project. They're trying to find more senior leadership to help shift things over. The reason I know is because they've approached me, and they've they need to they're wondering like, well, how long will it take to rebuild the whole thing from Angular 1 to React? It varies, but on the low end, maybe 15 to 20K. And then they're like, oh shit, we blew our whole budget on the first build with the Angular 1. We can't like just scrap the whole thing and burn another 20K on a React build. And it's up, so well, you shouldn't have built it in Angular 1 then, like, or should have found a better Angular 1 guy, or just not hired cheap, right? Not hire cheap. Don't hire junior. Um, so another route people take is going the overseas route, which has its own set of landmines. Believe it or not, I've actually seen that work better, to be honest, in certain cases. But when it goes bad, it goes really bad. So I could see it. I've seen it work successfully, but when it goes bad, it goes bad. Like you have no project. You're gonna lose 6, 8, 9 months, $10,000, and get literally nothing out of it. So with the junior domestic developers, junior. I don't see it go well very often, but I also don't see it go to the point where it's unrecoverable, like the project is unsalvageable. I don't really see that as much. So, um, so yeah, those are the differences. Anyway, just to stay on point, it's something I see happening in the industry where you're seeing a bigger line of separation now. One sort of dirty little secret about tech is that people in tech are no different than people anywhere else, meaning that they don't want to change. People hate change, right? So if you're an Angular 1 developer and you graduated boot camp 1 year ago, 2015, so you're still relatively new, but that means you were learning, I'm sorry, 2016, it's 2017 now. That means you were learning Angular 1 at your boot camp and you had graduated a year ago and you're like sort of set in your way. You're like, this is what this is what got you here, so you want to stick with that. You might be an Angular 1 dev for another 2 years, right? Before it's too late, before you have to change, before you don't have a choice, right? So that labor market's going to stay where it is for a while, and then they're going to stay at the lower rates because they're in their comfort zone. They're also competing with simply more people, just literally just more people, so it drives the rates down. And then React and Node is harder. Not Node again, just more specifically React. So I should say React and Redux are harder. So that's definitely something worth thinking about. It's an interesting time right now to be in web development. Things are moving really fast, and the more I think about it now, the more I wonder, well, maybe this is the plan all along, right? Like, because everyone knows that Facebook and Google and Amazon, like they viciously compete for talent. So maybe the plan was to push out something that only the best devs can really embrace, i.e. React and Redux. The inventor of Redux, Dan Abramov, now works at Facebook, so he got swallowed up by the empire, I guess, and now they got good talent because of the React ecosystem. So simply getting good at React on its own is a qualifier. That on its own means, oh, you must be pretty good because React Redux is hard. Literally just React it by itself isn't the hardest thing. It's when you combine it with Redux and then a backend and build a full services web application using that. That's when things get hard. Um, so yeah, that might have been the plan all along. In which case, hey, whatever gets the job done, right? Here's what I know when I get when I the signals for clients and companies now are more clear to me. So whenever I see a company on AngelList saying we're looking for developers, Node, React, Redux, um, maybe some EC2 or Docker container DevOps experience, and either Mongo or Postgres. Right off the bat, I know I'm dealing with a group that understands the market. If you understand the market, we can speak on the same page. Right? That's a whole separate conversation. In fact, that's a whole separate video I'm going to do because I can go on for a while on that. But right off the bat, you're dealing with a group that either does or should understand the market. Because if you know what these technologies are, that means you have a good finger on the pulse of the industry in general. So right off the bat, you're not going to be dealing with a guy who says 25 bucks an hour, this will look good on your portfolio, we have more clients after this, and all that crap. Those are people who don't understand the market. So those people shouldn't even know what Node, React, Redux are. And that's a good thing. That's what you want. You want those people not to even understand the technologies, such that when they put up their posts on AngelList or wherever they go, LinkedIn, you're dealing with, they're signaling themselves out, right? They're signaling themselves out of the competition for the best talent, and then all they get left are the leftovers, literally the leftovers. So, um, so yeah, that's how the industry is shaping up as far as I can see. Things are still at a point where a lot of that's yet to be determined, so this is just speculation. So take that for what it's worth. But I certainly made a lot of my decisions just based on the market's sort of the overall vagaries of the market, right? So like I was an Angular 1 dev. I did a lot of Angular 1 in 2014 and first half of 2015. And then I realized that if I want to stay in this game, I better get my ass on React and Node. Well, I've been doing Node for a while, but React and Redux. And that's exactly what I did. And that was a very good decision. Um, the lesser developers, the people who hate change, which is luckily a high percentage, and people who just aren't flexible in general. They don't have the nimbleness of mind to be able to learn new things. Those people stick with what they stay where they are, and then it separates out the more senior devs. So, but like I was saying earlier on in the video, because these technologies are getting harder, that it's becoming that separation is becoming stronger. It's no longer a matter of complacency or even laziness. It's a matter of actual raw ability, um, which is a little bit more scary. It's a little bit more sobering, to be honest. Not everyone can do this, and I'm finding that there are people who just, no matter how hard they try, they won't be able to do this. Um, that's that's a kind of a depressing thought, to be honest. Like I'm not like saying that boastfully, but it's just true, and you have to figure out kind of where you fit in that spectrum. So okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.